You have two eyes, huh? Do you understand the game a bit? Yeah, have a look.
I'm not saying anything to you in particular because I know you're not too accurate with your reporting.
That's what you paid
so you're
for.
saying I should resign. So you're saying I should resign.
I think
that's
you should,
your opinion. Is that right?
That's my
okay,
opinion.
fine.
Are you going to resign then?
No, of course I'm not going to resign.
I simplify things next time.
Good evening, everybody. Very affectionate greeting to all of you around the world as I hear myself echoing in Joey Lynch's phone, because Joey Lynch is somewhere in an airport, I think. I don't know where he is, so I've muted him. Yeah, he appears to be in an airport. Welcome to TNC. I thought it was just going to be a nice chat between me and Josh, the two illustrious best hosts of this podcast, but Joey has crashed the date, as he tends to do many times. So look, a warm, very affectionate greeting to you, Josh Parish, first.
Thank you, Nick Stoll. We've got an interloper in our midst. I was looking forward to a nice, My Dinner with Andre style one-on-one, but unfortunately, Joey's plane has landed on time.
It's the first time that Qantas hasn't had any problems this whole year in terms of getting flights. Joey, if you wouldn't mind, let's see if your audio sounds better than when I tried to join the pod from Frankfurt Airport. Tell us, how's it going?
It's going very well, and in fact, my flight hasn't landed on time yet. In fact, the reason I'm calling in is because my flight is delayed, and I haven't gotten on it yet and left Sydney Airport. So I'm calling you from Sydney Airport, not Melbourne Airport, and though this is just a very quick cameo to reinforce that I do in fact have ticket, and I did rock up at the assigned time, but my flight's now boarding now, so I'm going to bail. But if you guys can keep going for an hour and a half, I'll call when I land.
Look, Joey, as you know, this is the espresso edition. I have the espresso cup in my hand to tell you that it's the espresso edition and that we won't be going in an hour and a half. Yep. But I have said previously, some may look at previous episodes and say that I've previously said that this pod will go under an hour and haven't quite kept my promise. Time management, a slight issue with this podcast. So potentially, Joey, there may be an opening for you. Alan Riley says, make sure you clap the plane when it lands.
I think we should clap that comment.
That's a great comment.
Great.
If you understand that
Alan,
reference,
you landed that joke.
Beautiful.
You landed that joke.
Yeah. Yeah, that's by the way, I when I was in my trip to Europe, clapped many a planes. Sometimes solo, sometimes joined by many other people. Frey gave me a few looks, but anyway, Joey, make sure you clap the plane.
I'll tell you what planes we're not clapping. The Bombers. What a disgrace! And with that, I'm leaving.
All right. AFL reference. That gets
we've got to kick him off the stream if he makes an AFL reference. That's the rule.
Oh, Josh, if it's just me and you, this is the best. This is the most beautiful TNC, the most pure. We won't do any wrestling references because neither of us will understand them. And we won't do any AFL references because I didn't even realize that it was the finals today until Twitter started going nuts about it.
It's not the finals. It's
not?
It's the last game before the final. It doesn't matter. Who gives a rat's?
Yeah. Hey, you know what? Already this pod is off to a better start. As people are saying in the comments, Lazar11, wow, bang on time. FB Skippy, what the fuck? It's actually 7:30 and it's starting. Run the memes, slandering us every opportunity he gets, always having to go at us about it not being at 7:30. You think we can't deliver? We can deliver, my friends. But yes, we're here at 7:30, and I always say, if you're not going to do a good job, at least show up on time. And that's possibly what's going to happen with me tonight. So it's off season, we're doing our best. But Josh, early comment coming in. D995 isn't using a real name because he's already throwing something at you. Shout out to Josh for ignoring me at Arden Street this week after I said, hey, man, I love the TNC pod. Nothing just blanked me. Josh, confirm or deny, were you at Arden Street this week?
I was. And I obviously didn't hear that.
He's too big. He thinks he's too big for his boots. He does one commentary gig on Paramount
I
Plus.
would have loved to have a conversation about TNC at Arden Street because for the record, I have to go to and film AFL presses for my day job sometimes, and I'm not in the cool in group with all the AFL journos who have their chats and so forth. Like us cameraman, we are invisible We are absolutely invisible to the rest of the media. We're just basically just slabs of meat that hold the equipment. So I would have been like, as long as the press conference hadn't started yet, pretty bored. So I'm so sorry. Like I would have loved to have a convo. Maybe my hearing's going. That's actually a real worry.
D995. Make your way up to Sydney. Make your way up to Denison Street. And if you say, hey, man, love the TNC pod, I'll say, thanks, bro. Have a great day. And keep it moving. But, that's a bit more than Josh will give you. No, but shout out anyone who's enjoying this. But, Josh, I don't know. It seems I did want to give you a lot of praise before we started, but I'm worried that the praise might go to your head because this week you did, in fact, make your kind of commentary debut for Paramount Plus. You've done a lot in MPL Victoria world. We've seen a lot of clips kind of come out of MPL TV and stuff. A lot of great moments that you yourself commentated on. But your first time doing the Australia Cup. How was your experience? Tell us about it. Because for me, it was really cool to hear, and I thought you did a really good job.
It was awesome. Like, firstly, like, thank you to everyone who like sent me nice messages and stuff. I'm completely overwhelmed this week by the support of the football community. It's been really, really, really nice. But yeah, the actual day was fantastic. I mean, working with Archie Thompson, he's pretty much exactly the same person on and off camera. Like, it's not some character or persona that he puts on. He just really is that happy-go-lucky guy all of the time. And so it was actually really good to work with someone who has that like level of good humor in that situation where you're doing your first big game. It really actually helped settle my nerves beforehand because he was just such a cheery mood despite the horrendous weather. Like, I know Sydney boy over here is going to rub it in, but it was quite literally howling tornado style winds and sideways rain.
So during the penalty shootout, when they put the ball on the spot and then the ball would refuse to stop and it was just moving and the ref was looking at the player like, mate, I don't know what you want me to do. Like, I can't stop the winds. Like, that was, if you guys ever say anything about Melbourne being the best city, I'm just going to show that clip on loop. Oh my God, it looked horrendous to be there.
It was, I was so glad that we weren't set up on the scaffold on the opposite side, which is usually the position for most MPL games I do when I'm call Hume City games. Unfortunately, like we were in the grandstand, which was good because we were a bit more sheltered from the weather. And there's kind of this square, like this, I guess, a tiny little balcony, I guess you call it, at the top of the grandstand where they had 2 cameras there. And usually at an MPL game, because it's a 1-camera show, you can squeeze in alongside the cameraman in that position if the weather's terrible. But because they had multiple cameras set up there, no space for us, and they had way more equipment because they're doing replays and all this stuff on site. So we were all the way over on the right-hand side of the grandstand. So everything left of screen was a very, very long way away. So occasionally I had to cover for the fact that I couldn't work out like who on earth had the ball. But I feel like I pulled it off. The replay screen that we had was going flying in the wind like every 5 minutes. So I had to catch it quite a few times. But it was an experience, that's for sure, with the elements. But the
magic of the cup, baby.
Yeah, but the funniest part of the whole night was the fact that we were in amongst the supporters because we were in the grandstand, and I'm with Archie Thompson, and I don't get bothered by members of the public very often, unless I'm at Arden Street, of course. But
and then you've got no time for D995, who, by the way, has confirmed I was sitting by the front door charging my phone. If you
again, I am so sorry. I didn't realize. People were coming up to Archie during the live broadcast and asking him for selfies and autographs. We're like, guys, we're kind of in the middle of something here. So that was a bit of an issue in the first half because Archie is like so accommodating and so nice.
He's like, yeah, go for it. It'll be fine.
What do I do? Because he really didn't want to let anyone down. So no, it was great fun. I was super lucky that I got such a dramatic game. There were some great games that night. Maybe one of the best overall nights in Cup history in terms of 3 games going to extra time, 2 games going to penalties, and one of them being an 8-goal thriller over at Oakley. So yeah, it was an awesome experience to be involved in it. And I got to interview Charlie Austin afterwards, who's one of the, I would say, best interviews in the A-League. Like, he's such good talent.
seemed like so. Just on Charlie Austin, right? I'll be honest with you. I had my doubts about him when he came to the A League. I kind of thought journeyman English striker going to Brisbane Roar, famed for their Brexit FC that they had a few years ago. I just thought, oh, this is going to suck. This is just going to be annoying. He's been great. He's like, in terms of like, I loved even when he took the penalty and then he kind of wound up the crowd by like playing the villain like that. That to me was so much fun. And then on top of that, it was, he did an interview, I think, afterwards, and I think he did it with you. And he was saying that you were saying on Twitter that he went to the change rooms and met all the Avondale players as well. And he seems like a really good guy. So it's cool, I think, that how much Charlie Austin has embraced Australia and embraced his role as a big name, but not a, he's not a Del Piero or anything. But he knows that he has a bit of notoriety, has a bit of experience in the game, and that the Avondale players probably really appreciated that.
Yeah, it's funny because you had the contrast between him, I guess, knowing his role as in, oh God, I can't believe I'm going to say it, wrestling parlance, the heel in that situation, and playing it up to the crowd. You saw when he took his penalty, he put it straight down the middle, and then he's turning to the supporters and giving it the big ones and prompting all the boos and that, because he realizes it's an entertainment business and he's there to not just to score goals, but also, be a character. But then when you get off the pitch and you hear that he went to the Avondale change rooms and said, boys, the better team lost. You played us off the park. You were fantastic tonight. Keep going. You're an awesome team. That shows the class of the guy as well. So I think it was a good blend. And he actually confirmed to me in the post-match interview that he didn't mean to go down the middle, and the penalty spot had a massive divot in it from trying to keep the ball. I think part of it was already kind of torn up, but they were trying to keep the ball still, so they were like almost burying it in the grass. So he mishit the penalty. He didn't mean to go straight down the middle at all, but of course played it off like he meant it.
Yeah, I think it was like, for you kind of doing your commentary there, but it was kind of the perfect like Australia Cup game. Now, obviously, we'd love to have seen the upset, but like you say, you had kind of Brisbane Roar obviously weren't great, but Danzaki, like a moment of brilliance that really kind of made you think like, oh, that's why these guys are at the A-League level. But then you had the drama and the kind of, and the conditions of what it's like to play, I guess, in the NPL game. How did you see kind of the overall game, and what was your kind of big takeaway from that?
A couple of big takeaways. One is that you don't have to park the bus to be competitive against these A-League teams. Avondale don't change their approach for anybody. Zoran Markovski is the most attacking coach in the NPL. He's a zealot in that regard. Like, he's never going to... He could be playing Real Madrid tomorrow and he still would try and have a go. That's just who he is. That's who the team is. So they were playing out from the back, and they almost... shot themselves in the foot a couple of times in the first 10 minutes with giveaways, but they didn't let that dissuade them from their style. So they were able to be themselves and actually impose themselves on the game, which I think was a great lesson for other clubs who might think, oh, we're up against the A-League teams. We've got to be cautious and stick numbers behind the ball, which can be a good underdog strategy as well, but you got to play to your strengths. For Brisbane, they look a little bit underprepared for the season. I know it's a few weeks away. And yeah, we're very happy to have Austin in the league. As you say, Danzaki is a fantastic player. We know that. And there's a couple of boys who've looked promising. Henry Hoare's been really good coming off the bench, etc. and so on. Sorry.
When I saw he scored and I saw the way he commentated, I thought, oh, he must be thinking in that moment, in his head, he must be thinking, oh, I scored.
It did cross my mind, but I felt that was not the time for a TNCN joke. No. But they really scraped by. They really were outplayed, and that doesn't happen that often when there's a semi-pro team taking on a professional team. So
yeah, we've seen cup
especially with all of the off-field stuff going on around Brisbane Roar at the moment, which we'll get into later. It doesn't bode terribly well for Brisbane Roar's overall season. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting because, I mean, if you kind of look at the team, like, there is something to like about the squad, I think. You've got Charlie Austin, like you say. man, I'm a massive Danzaki fan. I thought he was great when he was in the A League. Akbari, is a very promising player. Ivanovic. There's some players there. Maybe there's not enough depth there, and it'd be interesting to see if they strengthen kind of closer.
Oh, sorry, you mentioned Ivanovic, and it just brought up like one of Archie's observations actually on co-commentary that stuck with me from that night. Is that Ivanovic looks like he has no confidence at all. There were two instances where the ball was worked out to him in a bit of space, one-on-one with his fullback, and he clearly thought about taking on the player and then turned and then played it back. And he did it twice in the space of less than a minute, and Archie was almost like about to throw his headset off. Like he couldn't believe it. And then later on, when he was sort of playing on instinct and he didn't quite have as much time to make a decision, Ivanovic actually did take on a player and he beat him superbly. So just to see a young player with that little confidence when he's got actually so much ability is actually really concerning. And I hope Ivanovic can find that confidence to actually reach his potential, because we know he has it, and there's a few players in that category at Brisbane at the moment, I think.
Well, it's funny, like there's so many players like in Australian football who you think if you had a bit more confidence, what a player you would be, because in flashes there's talent, but also you think about the environments that these players are in. Sometimes I think if the coach or whatever the system is so worried about you making a mistake, losing the ball, especially in an attacking opportunity, how many times do you even hear it from the crowd where there's a good counter attack on or something, and then the player tries to dribble past the player, loses the ball, and then you just hear the whole crowd go, oh, and you can feel that everyone, the other players, the coach, everyone and it just kills the player. But you need to, I think, encourage those players to take the risks, because Messi loses the ball, but eventually he goes past and scores. So I don't know. It's an interesting one. But yeah, we should give a shout out to Avondale, as Blake Hampton has done via YouTube. Box Office Avondale. They're 8th in NPL Victoria. You obviously know it better than me. Why have they, I guess, struggled a bit in NPL Victoria, but done well here in the Cup?
Yeah, they finished 7th today, just outside finals. They actually lost to South Melbourne. So their season's over now. But South Melbourne top of the league. So the reason that they've been struggling this season has been largely due to injuries. They, along with Hume City, had to wait to play the cup final last year because of COVID lockdowns and things, and they didn't end up playing it till November. So they had on and off training for a much longer time, and they didn't get an off season, really, because they had to start preseason pretty soon after that for 2022. And you look at where both those teams finished, and Avondale was on top of the league when the season was suspended in 2021, and Hume City was about 6th-ish. I think they were mid-table. And now this season, both those sides have dropped by about 4, 5, 6 places. Hume just avoiding relegation and Avondale just missing the finals. So I think there's a common theme there. The two teams that made the Doherty Cup final have just been ravaged by injury because of the COVID-enforced delays, and then this game in November that they still had to be fit and prepared for. So yeah, it's unfortunate because they've got so much talent in that group. Like, they're obviously one of the most ambitious and one of the most high spending team in NPL Victoria. And they also have the most ambitious kind of game plan. So it's a bit of a shame to see them miss finals. But then you see a one-off game where they do have some of their players back and it all comes together for them. You see the ceiling.
Yeah. All right. Well, speaking of Brisbane Roar, it's the big topic of the moment, and D995 has brought up. And by the way, as it's just me and Josh tonight, your comments are more important than ever. Yes. All right. We rely on them. You need to stimulate the conversation. You are the third co-host today, a collective co-host. So get in there, get as many comments as possible, and keep this going. Your job is to make this show last beyond an hour. Because me and Josh run out of things to say, but there's just two of us, it might run out. So make sure you push it past an hour. D995 asks, or first of all, D995, tell me how you want me to say it. 995, 9995. He's asking, in a serious question, WTF is going on with Corey Brown and Brisbane. PFA is involved as well. Looks like a serious situation. A lot of people are looking forward to Vince Regari being on the show today. No Regari, no party. Congrats against Josh. Yeah, so basically Vince couldn't be here, but we're going to have him in article form. So I'm going to share his article that he wrote, because I think this is the best way, because you have to remember this is a kind of quite a difficult scenario for us to talk about. So we'll kind of just roll through Vince's article, and we'll talk about the things we can talk about, and we won't speculate on the things we can't speculate about. But this is in the public domain, so we'll just kind of go through it. Vince Regari, a feud has erupted between Brisbane Roar and the A-League's Players Union over an attempt to sack defender Corey Brown over alleged drug use, one of a number of serious legal battles the club is fighting that could force action against their Indonesian owner. Brown, a long-time club stalwart, who has never failed a drug test, is fighting against the termination of his 3-year contract and denies all allegations made against him by the Roar, who are also under investigation for an alleged JobKeeper rort and are at risk of being thrown out of Queensland's NPL competitions due to unpaid debts with the state governing body. Firstly, what a sentence that is. Like, just like Brisbane Roar's Monday morning, tomorrow, they're getting in and they're like, all right, we're going to sort this Corey Brown situation. JobKeeper. Did we rot the system? What's happening with our NPL teams? Oh, we haven't paid? Oh, we're going to get thrown out? Okay, I might have a coffee and then I'll try and sort some of this stuff out. Like, Josh, this is what happened to Brisbane Roar. Like,
I think if you talk to most Brisbane Roar fans, you'd say the club has been kind of slowly circling the drain ever since the Backeries took over. You see where they were under, the Ange Postecoglou years and the glorious heights where they were the standard setters in the A-League. And now, these are all allegations and things, of course, but it's a laundry list of items as outlined in this in Vince Regari's article that don't paint a particularly flattering picture of this operation and how professional it really is. If everything in this article, all the is accurate, and I'm sure Vince does his homework, of course. It seems like they're cowboys who think they're above the rules. That's the impression that you get from the outside reading this laundry list of stuff that they have apparently done wrong.
I mean, there is a crucial line there. I think Brown has never failed a drug test. So supposedly they've dismissed him for a drug issue. I guess at a certain point, if you this is just all contracts in Australia. If you are dismissing someone, you have to have valid reasons to dismiss them. And if you claim that they have a drug issue, you have to present some evidence for that. And it can't just be like, well, I think you do or whatever. Like, this is why, drug tests exist in professional sport. So I wonder kind of, I just don't understand kind of what Brisbane Roar thinks the leg that they have to stand on, basically.
Maybe they think they have other proof of this.
Yeah. Okay.
But we're not privy to all of this,
no,
of course.
No.
So we don't know whether they have proof or not, and that's probably like the entire matter that's before the dispute resolution chamber at the moment, and what the PFA is fighting on Corey Brown's behalf.
Yeah, I'll just jump a bit forward. So basically, the PFA has become involved. This is PFA co-chief executive Bo Bush. He said, as the club is aware, Corey has initiated judicial proceedings to dispute Brisbane Roar's termination of his contract. As a consequence of this legal action, Corey's contract remains on foot until final determination is made. This is something the club, deliberately or otherwise, is failing to understand. As the club continues to operate well below the expected standards of a professional football club, the PFA's primary focus remains on protecting Corey's well-being, something the club seems to have little regard for. The Roar has since released a second statement rejecting the PFA's statement, confirming Brown was terminated for serious misconduct and inviting Bush to disclose his involvement in this investigation and subsequent termination process, and to publicly state the PFA's position on the issues that gave the club no option but to terminate Brown's contract for senior misconduct. Basically, since then, we've seen a lot of the players have come out in support of Bo Bush. It's quite rare for a club to go after the PFA's, co-chief executive in a statement for this issue. So it's interesting to see kind of how this will play out. But
it struck me how personal that seemed.
Yeah,
like whatever about the factual issues that we can't establish here on this podcast. Otherwise, we would be the dispute resolution chamber. We can state our opinions about how the tone of this public communication and the strategy that Brisbane have used. and it comes across as bullying. It really does. It comes across as trying to intimidate, and that really rubs me up the wrong way. Like it's just not good enough.
It also kind of comes across to me as people who maybe don't have experience or aren't making the smartest decisions. I can't imagine a lawyer is advising Brisbane Roar and said, you know, it'd be great, put out a statement where you go personally after a PFA chief executive. That will really, help resolve this situation in our favor. It does seem to me like, again, like you're playing by your own rules. It's interesting.
Cowboys shooting from the hip. That's the impression that you get with all this stuff.
Stephen Kralon says, I would have gone to the Reading Out Rugari podcast if I knew this was the deal. Hiraldo, who is up in Brisbane, so proud of this club. Stephen, again, undefeated at being defeated in court. Come on, Brisbane. It's interesting because this isn't the first issue that they've had. Kind of later in the article, Vince went through it all. And you think, okay, they were amazing kind of 2011 to 14. There was the Ange Postecoglou era, and then there was the Mike Mulvey era where they won a championship as well. But we kind of go through, what's been happening at the Roar over the last couple of years. The Roar, this is from Vince's article, the Roar has lived a nomadic existence after falling out with two landlords of their previous training facilities, the Queensland Rugby Union and Logan City Council, over unpaid rent and utility bills. My understanding is they now train on the Gold Coast.
Yes, that's something that I learned on Wednesday night, actually talking to people before the game, is nearly all of their squad lives on the Gold Coast now, and they train at Metricon. So...
yeah, because and then they play. They play most of their games in Redcliffe, which is north of
crazy.
Brisbane.
And it seems to me that I remember with the Roar's training ground stuff, they had an issue whereby it seemed to be that the pitch that they've been training on was way too hard, and they had all these soft tissue injuries. And then they moved out to somewhere near, I don't know, Brisbane geography, I apologize if I get this wrong, but like the west, like Logan or wherever it was, which was supposed to be a much better, newer facility. And this is supposed to be this big turnaround in, the Roar's injury management and training and all that stuff. And now they've apparently haven't paid the rent, allegedly haven't paid the rent. And they've moved to the Gold Coast. Like, it's crazy.
It is weird when A-League clubs start acting like my friends when they were 19 years old and struggling to pay rent, and then just moving to other places and being like, sorry, whatever you're going to do. Last year, former Socceroo Brett Holman had to force the club to cough up over $400,000 in withheld insurance money after suffering a career-ending injury while playing for the Roar against Perth Glory in 2018. Ex-coach Robbie Fowler also took the club to FIFA and won a six-figure payout for unfair dismissal when he and then assistant Tony Grant was sacked in the mid-2020. Like, it's pretty amazing how, Fowler was a pretty bad coach for the Roar, and you still managed to have to pay him out because you unfairly dismissed him. Like, there was probably grounds for dismissal, like just being poor.
Yeah, I think, if you look at their position on the table under Fowler, it wasn't that bad. The style of football was genuinely horrible and awful.
I think they
maybe
claimed it was
they
because he did an interview. Remember, wasn't there some interview involved or something?
Because there was COVID stuff, and then he was in the UK, and there was claims about whether he was going to come back or not, and all this stuff. But maybe they didn't have clear enough outlines of what their KPIs were, and that therefore. And you look at the FIFA dispute resolution process. Fowler wouldn't be the first foreign coach to take an Australian club to that and then win a payout. That's a pretty powerful option that specifically foreign coaches have when they're here. I remember Chris Taylor got a payout from South Melbourne as well. So I guess they have a little bit more leverage in that regard than local coaches, but still.
In 2015, midfielder Luke Braddon was able to have his contract with the club terminated due to over a year's worth of unpaid superannuation in the decision reached by FA's independent arbitrator. Queensland has recently overtaken Victoria as the state with the second biggest number of grassroots participants behind only New South Wales, underlining the strategic importance for football that region is positively represented at the professional level. It is what are they doing up there? Do they even like owning this football team? You're not improving it. You're just creating headache after headache for yourselves. Blake Hampton raises the question via YouTube: is there a way for the FA or the A leagues to strip the Baccaries of their license? Why do they even bother owning it? Like, genuinely, to me, I think you can chart, and I'm not saying this is an exact correlation, but you can chart kind of the A league's decline in terms of, interest and everything, all the issues that we're having in the A League, with the decline of Brisbane Roar a little bit. Brisbane is a massive market, and it's a one club town with, I think it's 2-3 million people in the city. It should be an incredibly successful club. As you say, there's heaps of people in Queensland playing football. It's been a disaster, this ownership.
It has been, and clearly they don't have the best interests of Australian football or the club or the people, the supporters or the players at heart when they're running it. That you can tell that from their actions. Speaking of like ways to actually sanction them, there are ways that Football Australia can get involved and heavily sanction the club if they're found to have breached the club licensing guidelines and so forth like that. So, this could end up with Football Australia stepping in and stripping them of their license. It could happen. And it could force, the A-Leagues, the APL, to actually take over the running of the club as they have with Newcastle Jets, which are still ownerless. So, that might be where this is going eventually. We'll see. But it's not pretty. Like,
I genuinely think you would be better off using some of that Silver Lake money to buy out the Baccaries than get in a big name marquee. Like, I don't know what the Baccaries want for Brisbane, because I don't know actually even what you're selling. There's no stadium. There's no training ground. You're selling what, the club colours, the shirts, the numbers that fall off. I just don't know. Geraldo makes a good point. 2011, 2014, standard setters on the field only. Yeah. They still had a lot of issues kind of off the field. And I think Ange, it shows how much Ange was doing, that he was able to be successful. I did say before that the comments were kind of a third co-host, and Alan Riley has really embodied that by plugging his own work. A-Leagues and Beyond wrote a really good article for ALWU, Alan's cheap plugs, on how Brisbane are finally starting.
Are we going to go through his article
records.
Paragraph by paragraph as well? Is that going to be our next segment?
Alan, send the link. Gerardo also says Baccaries being Baccaries. Gerardo makes another point. Falling out with Logan City Council became particularly ironic and infuriating now that Logan Lightning, my local club, might be relegated from NPL 1 Queensland despite finishing above the Roar Academy side. For a while there, the Queensland football was producing a lot of kind of quality players. Robbie Cruz came out of that system. Mitch Nichols came out of that system. Michael Zulo. I'm trying to think else who was kind of in that era. But
I think Tommy Moore was in that era as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So, it is a real shame. And to me, I just look at it and I think there's so much potential with the Roar, but there's so much that's gone wrong over the past years that I'm not surprised that their crowd's dwindling, that their interest is dwindling. I remember even seeing like a video of a Raw fan who was like, "That's it, I'm sick of this. This is my last time at Redcliffe or whatever." So, it's just a sad situation, regardless of this individual incident with Corey Brown. We don't know how that will be resolved, and we don't know the particulars of it, so we can't comment on it too much. But overall, the Baccaries ownership of Brisbane has been a complete and utter disaster. And you cannot even understand what joy they get out of it. They can't be making money out of it, surely. It doesn't seem like this is a money-making operation. They can't be getting any joy because they don't seem to be like, we want to take this club to the next level and, it's been our dream. Why even own it? Like, what is the purpose? I just don't get it. I mean,
No.
You've got extra pay from Paramount Plus doing a commentary gig. Do you want to stump up and put the cash? Should TNC, should we put our money together and buy Brisbane Roar?
I don't know if that would then be a conflict of interest for the podcast.
Look, it wouldn't be the first time that a media person in Australian football media had an interest in a football team. But look, we do conflicts of interest. Well, we'll just put a little disclaimer down the bottom and we'll call them Box Office Roar. It'll be all good.
Yeah, I mean, Football Australia over the years have not shown much interest in fan ownership. go all the way back to North Queensland Fury, where that was the plan to save the Fury and keep them in the A-League, and basically Football Australia said no. But I wonder whether going forward we need to start establishing some kind of mechanism for this, so that these situations can't happen. Because it's
because one bad owner you can replace one bad owner with another bad owner. Like there's no guarantee if the Backrys was to sell, and every time kind of a new prospective A-League owner is mentioned, you're always like, oh, it's a consortium that no one actually knows if they exist, and like who are these people?
Because this is such an important place in the Australian football ecosystem, because it's Queensland's only A-League team, and now our entire youth development strategy is built around A-League academy sides.
Yeah.
So, now that we're not really going down the route of centres of excellence and all that kind of thing, and we're entrusting youth development essentially to the A-League academy sides. And yes, the NPL clubs and community clubs play a huge role in that as well, but often they're feeding players to the A-League programs. Where do Brisbane or Queensland-based young aspiring footballers go and play now? Like, I don't know where they should go, because Warren Moon is a guy I have a hell of a lot of time for, and I think he's doing the best that he can in the situation. If people remember, I think it was the FNR A-League preview last season that you might have been on, Stoll.
Yeah.
I think I went huge on Brisbane Roar, and I was unfortunately way, way, way off the mark because I rate Warren Moon so highly. But how can you work under these conditions? How can you get the best results? It's my point being is that because we don't have promotion and relegation, there's no natural mechanism for clubs that aren't operating properly to be replaced by ones that are. And because our youth development is now entrusted to A-League clubs, this becomes like a pressing priority, because how long before the Raw stop attracting these sorts of players, or we start losing players to the sport or to other clubs? It really struck me that in Vince's article, a PFA survey found only 34% of Brisbane Roar players would recommend the club to others, which is that's as clear an indication as any that this situation and this type of management.
Josh, or I can't hear. But I'll just quickly bring up some comments. James Maloney, he says, have to have fans to have fan ownership, and at this rate, Brisbane's are going. Yeah, I mean, that's also something, like fan ownership, you think, oh, it's a massive club and the fans can own it. But Geraldo also says, FA stepping in to remove Backrys would require them to care more about football in Brisbane than they historically have. Look, keep your comments coming in, because, we might not have Josh's mic. I'm not sure if you're still there, Josh.
Can you hear me
still? Oh, I think it might be my headphones.
I think your headphones might be cooked. Let us know in the comments if you can still hear me, and if it's just Nick Stoll.
Hey, look, we might be having tech issues, but we're not having issues like Nick DeBano, which Lockie Flanagan has dubbed Nick Disappeared, and Alan Riley has chimed in with Nick Departed, and then Lockie Flanagan has one-upped him again. Nick dropped off. Give us your Nick DeBano based puns. And Lockie, feel free to actually come on the show. I don't know if someone can send you the link. It's in one of the chats. But yeah, if you're watching, great to have you on, because Lockie also made his Paramount Plus commentary debut in the Australia Cup, which I thought was really amazing. Toro says TNC silent movie, and Nicholas Webster undermines me and says we can hear Josh. So clearly it's just me that's having issues. Should we move on should we go back onto the Australia Cup and just kind of quickly go through the other results?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, so the kind of Wellington Phoenix beating Melbourne City was an interesting one. I only kind of caught the highlights of this, but Melbourne City, was there pressure now on Kisnorbo? It doesn't seem like it seemed like it was going so well a few years ago, and now it seems like it's just kind of trailing off.
Yeah, look, their results have been too good for his job to be in any jeopardy. I mean, he's won the title, he's delivered a hell of a lot. Whatever your opinions are of his coaching, that you can't really argue with the results. It's been pretty good. And yes, we hold Melbourne City to a higher standard than some other clubs because they have certain advantages in terms of facilities and budget and so forth. So they've always got a great squad. I think they are lacking in midfield. Metcalf's departure leaves another hole for them. They signed Thomas Lamb the other day, who I don't know if he's going to play centre back or holding midfield. He might be he might jump into that number 6 role, which he's played before, and he from his CV looks good. We never know with some of these players because I'm not going to claim to have seen much of him, but he was part of Finland's squad for the Euros, so that's pretty significant, even if he didn't get on the park. So that's I think they are lacking depth in certain positions. But there's also the idea that they've been playing the same way for a little while now, and our team's going to start figuring them out. And can Patrick Kisnorbo come up with a game plan that's not based on what Eric Mombarts did as his predecessor? As Nick continues to be unable to hear me, I think.
No, I heard all that. That was really good. Jack Pentelios says Kisnorbo on fraud watch. I do love whenever someone gets put on fraud watch, rightly or wrongly. It's just an interesting time in anyone's career when they get put on fraud watch. Some of the best have been put on fraud watch. Ronaldo Fenomeno at one stage was put on fraud watch, probably around his second knee injury, and then he came back in the 2002 World Cup and absolutely smoked all the haters. So there's still a chance if you are put on fraud watch. Don't fear. It's just a test for you. Alan Riley sings Jukic was right. City don't function. Jukic was right. It's an interesting one for LC. I mean, for Wellington, good result for them to get through kind of to this later stage of the competition. Would be amazing for a team not from Australia to win the inaugural Australia Cup. Like, there's a part of me that always roots for chaos, and I think Wellington have become a team now that I would love to see them just win just to explain that to people all around the world. It's like, who won? The other team from New Zealand. Jack Pentelios, George Blackwood was born on fraud watch. I mean, look.
No, I have to push back against this. He's a secret centre back. We've covered this on the show before. He's actually a central defender. He just doesn't know it yet. Georgie, This is the way to save your career.
I mean, that's true. That's true. Maybe your coaches should be on fraud watch because they haven't identified the fact that you're a centre back. Should we talk about Adelaide United and their 2-2 draw with Adelaide City, which Geraldo has made a good point. Massive shout out to Teo plugging TNC on the Paramount broadcast for Adelaide City United game. Good evening if you're tuning in for the first time and you're wondering why was he plugging a podcast where two guys can't work out how headphones and microphones seem to work. But 2-2, like, great night. I know they didn't get through, but great night for Adelaide United, wouldn't you say?
For Adelaide City, you mean?
Sorry, Adelaide City. Sorry, I mean, good night for Adelaide United.
Yeah,
well. They did get through.
I think it was just a good night for football in Adelaide. It was a good occasion. As Teo kind of explained on the show last week, these clubs actually have quite a fondness for each other, and there's so much crossover between the two teams. It wasn't really a rivalry game as such. They were bigging up as the Adelaide Derby, but really it was just, a nice celebration of football in South Australia, and it was a cracking game. Some great goals, especially that left-footed strike from Zach Waters, where Teo ended up comparing him to Roberto Carlos in the goal wrap, which I thought was fantastic. But also, I think we maybe have to admit, I certainly have to admit, I don't know if you slammed as well, but I might have to admit defeat on the Ibasuki front. I think he actually is good, and I was wrong.
Yeah,
I'm willing to come out and say that. I was wrong about Ibasuki. He looked like a big lumbering oaf when he arrived. He's actually a lot more than that. And I think he actually really helps Adelaide because I think they have still major issues with their midfield, but having a striker who can hold up the ball like Ibasuki can is massively helpful to kind of bail a team out when they can't, progress the ball in other ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Our co-hosts are helping us. Jack Bentelios says Zach Clough looked a lot better than he did when he first arrived. Alan Riley kind of echoes that. Clough looked good against City and Newey. And then
Similar
Alan Riley,
theme to maybe judging players a little bit too early off too smaller sample size, especially foreigners arriving in Australia and the A-League for the first time.
And the language barrier and all the things that they have to.
Zach Clough with the language barrier.
No, I meant Iwasuki, but potentially as well. Adelaide. It's a funny accent. Alan Riley, who's an Adelaide United fan, he says we were so lucky to get through. City were all over us, and cautious Carl. I believe you dubbed him, Josh, the human handbrake. No,
that was my nickname for Carl. Yeah. Carl Viet, whose name I've been saying wrong for several years.
Carl Viet, he brought on one day at 1-0 up. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like, it's interesting you're talking about Avondale and how much kind of you respect them for the way that they kind of play the same way always. There's so many coaches in the A-League that just I find are frustratingly risk averse. Like, so many coaches, you feel the fear in them as they coach in the decisions that they make. It's odd to bring up your kind of defensive midfielder when you're 1-0 up against a semi-professional side. Alan Riley says Iwasuki on baller watch, Jukic and Barnaby Josh on forward watch. Maybe that's why Ante hasn't come on the show again. Maybe he can't handle the fact that Iwasuki might be a decent player. And, he never wants... Josh, you're the bigger man. You've done your stint in North Queensland. You know what politics is about. You know you can admit defeat. Ante, I don't know.
Yeah, he's still raging against it. He still can't accept that Hiroki Iwasuki, who scored a ridiculous overhead kick in the last round as well, might actually be a baller.
Let's have a look at the fixtures that are coming up in the quarterfinal stage because there's some good ones. So we've got Peninsula Power versus Sydney United, which means we are going to have a NPL team through to the semi-finals. That's previously happened, but it's because the draw was basically rigged in their favour. So that's I think a really nice moment. And Sydney United had that kind of epic penalty shootout victory over Western United. So,
amazing for Sydney United, a team that's had a pretty terrible NPL New South Wales season, to get to the quarterfinals is awesome. And the crowd at King Tom the other day, superb. Well done to everyone who came out, and I'm sure they'll come out again in numbers in Brisbane. For Peninsula, I don't even know where Peninsula Power play. Let's be honest. My Queensland geography has really been exposed today. But Penn Power again rode their luck a little bit against Green Gully. But we're going to get an NPL team in the semi-finals, which is a good outcome. But I like that it's happened organically and not as a result of some like contrived draw.
Also, the thing with you saying you don't know where Peninsula Power is, it's probably because we're traumatized from Brisbane Roar not being in Brisbane. They're in Redcliffe, they're in the Gold Coast. They might have an address somewhere that they use, so those bills get sent somewhere else. I'm not sure. Oakley Cannons versus Sydney FC. How will Sydney FC find that away trip? Obviously Oakley down in Victoria. What can they expect?
One of my favourite grounds to go to, Oakley, and not just for the Suvas, which are very good. Although I have to criticise the club for switching from pitas to hot dog buns. That was a very controversial decision.
Forget Brisbane Roar. We got bigger problems to solve, my friend. That's an outrage.
Even with the sort of rolls that they use now, the meat is
better,
unbelievable.
Wow.
So,
just stick it on a plate. Don't need a bun.
But Oakley is very much your classic like suburban NPL team with a ground that's like a little bit claustrophobic in terms of the fans are right on the fence line, right on top of you. There is a grandstand, of course, but most people, will choose to stand around the fence as well. And then it's a really small pitch. I'm not sure what the actual dimensions are, but it's tight. And that enables Oakley to play a game where they try and win the ball in congested areas in the middle of midfield and then spring really quickly on the counter-attack. And because the pitch is so small, it's almost like watching a futsal game or something. because you get this really end-to-end feel a lot of the time, and the ball is absolutely zipping around. The surface is held up pretty well, apparently, looking pretty good. Andy Harper was apparently impressed with the deck on Wednesday night. So it can get a little bit boggy there at times, but the ball should be zipping around. Sydney FC will be in for a battle because Oakley are super well drilled. The issue is going to be, coached by Chris Taylor, and Chris Taylor is he's kind of like the Mourinho of NPL Victoria. Like, his teams are always they know what to do without the ball all the time, and then he gets talent up front that can do really good individual things, essentially. So they're going to be in a game. The issue is going to be their injury list and whether they can get their first choice team out on the park, because it was a makeshift lineup with a guy who'd played combined total of less than 70 minutes starting up front against Brisbane City and scoring 2 goals in Nick Gioran. Whether they can get their full strength side back in time is the big question.
Our co-host doing a great job just letting us know where Peninsula Power is, saying Redcliffe. That's from Geraldo.
Yes, I actually did Google that while we were talking about it. It is sort of Brisbane, sort of.
Stephen says they play out west near Logan. I think that might be a reference to your previous not knowing where Logan is. Nicholas Real, he's giving us exactly, not only is he giving us where the Penn Power plays, he's giving us his own location. Penn Power play about 3 minutes away from Dolphins. Oh, no, sorry. Someone said it was near their house or something. Anyway, Torres makes the point. If Penn Power had a crocodile mascot, Josh would know exactly where they play.
I feel like I've totally severed my relationship with the North Queensland voters as a result of this podcast. I've been exposed as an interloper.
Lockie Flanagan says Josh would know where Penn Power played if they were situated in a marginal seat. That's the good stuff. Paul Turner makes the point. Ukic no longer turns up, and you guys get away with food safari talk. Look, this is the thing. It's you can't just focus on food safari, which is, I guess, what Ante was criticizing. But food still needs to be discussed. All right, it needs to be improved at every opportunity we get. All right. The best food in the world should be at these grounds. And imagine the lines you'd get. Actually, in a way, you should just get the best food truck in Melbourne, stick it at an NPL ground, and then hipsters will turn up and go, oh, I guess I'm watching some Australia Cup now. That's one way to boost crowds. It's going to be interesting for Sydney FC. It'll be interesting to see if all their new signings have started. We're going to get onto this later, but I'm kind of interested to hear your thoughts, because when it was announced that Joe Lolly was going to play for Sydney FC, you were quite excited by him in the group chat. I was on the NRI, never heard of this guy. Who is he? Oh, whatever. He won't be that good. But you have faith.
I may have been influenced here by a co-worker of mine who is a mad Nottingham Forest fan. And
shout out Tom.
Joe Lolly. And also, I think he's deleted his account now, but he had a very progressive, very good Twitter presence, and he was very vocal against the Tories and things like that. So I don't want to bring politics into it, but I just thought, you're one of the good ones. You get it.
I know he's going to get on with one member of the Sydney FC team.
Yeah. Nice style, by the way. I was reading a lot about him when he signed all the athletic pieces and things, and he just seems to be a bit of a down to earth player, because he played at amateur level for so long, and then suddenly his career vaulted, so many divisions in the space of 6 months, and now he's a professional footballer. Because he was at uni, he was paying to play, like the rest of us. And then he was sort of I guess an amateur league legend, and then all of a sudden, his career propelled him to unforeseen heights. So I think he's got a bit of perspective in that regard. And also as a player, he seems to be, although somewhat injury prone in the last couple of years, a bit of a maverick in terms of, he tries stuff on the ball. He's got, that confidence to try something unexpected and take risks on the pitch, and that's what I like.
Yeah, and you know what? Watching some of the highlights from his career at Nottingham, he does kind of look very exciting, very direct, willing to take on players, which I think Sydney FC, when they kind of had Ninkovic and Baumjohann kind of in those wide positions, Ninkovic, Baumjohann, great players, great technical players, rarely kind of burst past a player with a dribble or speed. Much more about kind of playing 1-2s or, just creating separation and sliding another player in. So it's going to be interesting to see, the way they line up. I've seen a few Sydney FC fans kind of give their starting 11s and who's going to be in what position and, where players are going to play. Really interesting to see who goes in what position, and also does Corica stay with the 4-3-3 after 2 games without a win in the opening season? Like, that's always the thing. People can start, we're going 4-3-3, we're changing it up, and then as soon as the results go a bit bad, all right, let's just go back to what we know. So,
spoken like a man who's abandoned a New Year's resolution after January.
yeah, plenty. Like 5 minutes after the bell is hit. I actually went to Sydney FC's new stadium. I got a tour of it, courtesy of my work this week. And I got to say, it looks like cool, like big improvement, like really like nice and steep. Seems like it's going to, like, if it's full, it'll be amazing. How often will it be full? Basically was every single, like everywhere we went, running through my head was, how is Sydney FC going to fill this 42,000 seater stadium? And how is it going to look when there's only 15,000, 20, like 20,000 will be a good crowd for Sydney FC based on kind of their numbers. It's really interesting to see how many people go back.
Are they going to close the top deck? Like
they might close it, but they won't. There's no like curtain to block it off, so you'll still see a lot of empty seats.
Well,
I don't know
you want people near where you want them on the side where the camera is pointing, right?
Yeah. But kind of historically, that's always been in the old SFS. I don't know how it's going to be in this one, but basically what would happen is during the summer, the sun is facing that side. The camera faces, right? So the sun is shining if you're in your eyes, if you're on the opposite sides of the camera. And so a lot of people, don't want to be there, or you got to be there with your arm up and It's not the nicest viewing experience. So it'll be interesting to see if the design of the stadium has helped that at all. But it does, like, the atmosphere seems like it'll be really good. This, like, really, it's hard to say, but doesn't seem like there's a bad seat in the house. It did remind me a lot of the stadium out at Parramatta, which I also think is really, really good. And it's a shame that the Wanderers haven't been able to bring back the glory years, because I'm sure if that stadium was rocking, it would be absolutely amazing. And it was the few Sydney derbies that I've been to when there was a massive crowd. But also, kind of importantly, I think the general admission experience for Sydney FC games, the seats will be pretty good. I know there was a bit of talk today about really expensive beers and stuff like that. It was 10:30 in the morning. I wasn't going and trying the beers and looking at the beer price, but that's a bit of a shame. But hey, look, Surrey Hills, lots of good bars around. Have a few before, have a few after. There's a good time. But it is potentially very exciting for Sydney FC if they have a good season in that stadium.
So talk to me about the location of this, because I don't know.
Okay.
Again, my geography outside of Melbourne is apparently non-existent. So is this a good place for people to actually go and travel to? Is it easy? Is it accessible? Is there other good places to eat and drink around it?
There's a couple of things. Previously, this stadium, which is basically located where the SCG is located, previously, it's in the inner east, but you'd get off at Central and you'd probably have to walk quite a long way. Sometimes there were special buses, but you were looking at like a 20, 25-minute walk up hills and stuff like that. Wasn't the greatest experience. You were going through like a nice suburb, if I may say so myself, Surrey Hills, and there was bars and stuff along the way, but it wasn't the best setup. They've now basically got a light rail tram that goes from Central Station. So you get off at Central Station, catch the tram, from there, couple of stops to the stadium. That's really good. Even if you're coming from the kind of the Paddington side, which is the suburb kind of to the north of the stadium, it's a bit more accessible now, just to walk straight in. You used to have to kind of like walk all the way around the stadium to access it. And they've kind of made the entry points a lot easier, which was a kind of pain in the ass of the old stadium. So it does seem like getting in and out is going to be a lot better. The
reason I ask is just because it seemed like part of the reason for poor attendances and things for not just because Sydney siders clearly have no ticker, which is a state of fact. It just seemed like a pain in the ass like to just go to a game, pay for parking, this, that, and the other. I don't know if that's a willing excuse. I don't know if that, and I don't know if this stadium has solved those issues.
I mean, I guess it also depends, like, where are you pulling your fans from? Like, where the stadium is situated is in a built-up...
We use the phrase catchment area.
Yeah, that's it, right? It's in a densely populated catchment area, right? So there's a lot of people who live around the stadium, in the suburbs around the stadium. So if you can get there via public transport, it's great. Now, Sydney notoriously, and Australia more generally, is a city for cars, and people just drive everywhere, and they come from places where maybe there isn't a train station close by, or a bus station or a light rail, and it can be difficult to get around on public transport. So I think what I'd be really interested to know is, like, where are Sydney FC members based, and how do they get to the stadium? Look, I always prefer going via public transport, even for many reasons. So, one, it's safer. Two, it's, often I find you get in and out of the stadium quicker. You don't get stuck in traffic. If, people can drink if they want to do that. So I think as good as it's going to get, it's close to Central Station, in the same way that Amy Park is close to Flinders Street Station, kind of.
No, it's not.
No? Have I got that wrong?
Richmond Station.
Richmond Station, whatever.
Yeah, Richmond is like on the east side of the city. Every train goes through Richmond. It's like the hub, and it's only one stop out from Flinders Street. So yeah, it's not that far from Flinders, but
yeah. So I think, look, I'm pretty excited for Sydney FC. I really hope that they go on a good run and they play some nice football and people have a really good experience and they're going every week. Last season was tough, and that was, we've seen with the Wanderers. You can have a really nice stadium, and the Wanderers stadium is close to Parramatta Station, and it's just like a 15-minute walk or something from the station. But you go through it's a nice experience if Wanderers are playing well. If they're not, and they're losing every week, and the fans stop turning up, and the atmosphere sucks, there's, as good as the stadium can be, there's not much. The club does need to perform at a certain level. It's a shame. It'd be lovely if the fans showed up every week, like you see in some countries, and they cheered nonstop and they sang and blah. It doesn't happen in Australian football. So I really do hope that kind of it works out. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. I can see some comments. People asking about the toilets. Daniel, Allianz Stadium toilet rating. I didn't actually use one of the toilets. I know Neil has asked that as well. There was 600 toilets. What I will say is, in the old stadium, it was like there were massive lines for the toilets, especially the women's toilets. And this is going to be hosting Women's World Cup games as well in 2023. And the fact that they have so many toilets, and I think so many kind of either unisex toilets or basically toilets that females can access, is actually a really good thing. And I think it's going to make their experience really good, because it is, for any football fan, basically what you want to do is roughly, most people, not everyone's like this, but probably have a drink or two before the game, probably have a drink at the game, then pee at halftime, then have a drink or two.
And you don't want to miss a goal. That's
yeah, exactly. Thing. Right. But how many times have you been to a stadium and like it's just got poor accessibilities to public toilets, and people are like, oh, I better go in the 30th minute so I can kind of beat the crowd. Of like, what? You don't want to have to do that. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting. Look, there's also the other thing, like some people say it was a waste of taxpayers' money, and that's another discussion to be had. But the government wastes taxpayers' money all the time, and at least we got a cool stadium out of it. Like that's what I'd say about that.
I want to come back to the 4-3-3 and the new Corica, because it does strike me as, I mentioned the New Year's resolution before. It does strike me as I can fix him kind of approach. He's done a lot of work on himself. He's come back. He's a new man. He's got a new system. It's going to be different this time. And I feel like after 3 defeats, it's going to go back to the 4-2-2 tried and true. Like that's just what's in the back of my mind this whole time is it going to change are Sydney going to play a more expansive brand of football? Are the supporters going to be satisfied with Corica still in charge after what happened last season? And I don't know, but some of the recruitment is relatively encouraging. I said last week that I don't think they're going to play any young players again, and that's, I stand by that. I don't think they are going to be playing many of the youngsters in the first team. That's just not really what Sydney tend to do, but that doesn't mean they're not going to play decent football,
No, and you know what? Some of the signings they've made, Lolly and the Slovenian player, wingers. Robert Mack, yeah. They're wingers. So I guess if you are playing 4-3-3, the fact that you're signing wingers gives me encouragement that you're committed to this. I don't know how you're going to use those players if you revert back to your 4-2-2-2-2. I guess you could have wingers in that system, but then they come inside a lot and you're kind of more relying on the overlapping fullbacks. So yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting to see. But I guess we'll get a taste of it against Oakley, and that's going to be an interesting one. Macarthur Wellington. Macarthur's an interesting one because is a little bit of hope bubbling amongst them. Do you think? Do you think there's a little bit of a positive change? Because I mean, I hammered them all last season. It does seem like there's a little bit of an uptick happening there.
Yeah, I mean, with Dwight York in charge, with hopefully playing, again, a more entertaining brand of football than they have at times. Daniel Arzani playing for the club is always, it's just intriguing to see how he does and whether he can start to rebuild his career. I'm really excited to watch him. It's hard to judge at this point because they just haven't had competitive games.
Yeah.
Maybe the fact that the games haven't been competitive is actually a credit to Macarthur.
Yeah.
Some of the signings I'm impressed by. Some of them I think are kind of meh squad filler stuff that I'm not particularly inspired by. So it's been a mixed bag, but wait and see. I think it's weird that Jack Rodwell ended up at Sydney and not Macarthur because the charm offensive from Dwight York was real. He made him captain of the All-Stars when he didn't have a club.
Yeah, that's right.
And then he said, no, he's going to go to Sydney. And is Sydney going to use him in midfield or is he going to play centre-back? I don't know.
Well,
yeah.
To me, he makes more sense at centre-back for Sydney, where they had a lot of issues in that position last season.
Do you say that because you think Jack Rodwell can play centre-back or do you say that because you don't want to watch Jack Rodwell play midfield?
The latter. I'll say that.
That's what it is, right?
Yeah.
It sounds brutal, but you probably we like a player in there who's probably a little bit more expansive with their passing and they're not just a stopper, I guess, which is what Jack Rodwell largely is at this stage of his career.
The other thing with Sydney is if you have Jack Rodwell, and he was fast in the A-League, we saw he can move. If you're playing him and Alex Wilkinson, can you play a high line because he has that speed? I think last year they had, was it Donachie there, who kind of had a lot of issues and they kind of muddled around with it. So that's also another reason why I would prefer to see Jack Rodwell in the defense as opposed to in midfield. And I like Yazbek. I think I don't want to see kind of Yazbek pulled out of that, number 6 position. And when we saw Jack Rodwell in that position, it was very chaotic, I thought, at the Wanderers. There was a lot of, he was making a lot of runs into the box and kind of there was a lot of kind of box-to-box nature of it, but it was chaotic, and I don't think it actually really helped the Wanderers. So it'll be an interesting
it's a question of deployment as well.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want Jack Rodwell playing as a 6, as you say. Maybe if he's kind of like a box-crashing kind of 8, that can be effective. If you've got enough subtlety around him, let's say.
Yeah.
You got maybe a Burgess, Yazbek, Rodwell midfield. Doesn't sound too bad. It sounds balanced to me. But, if I think the more pressing need is central defense, as you say.
Yeah. So Aaron Gerd, who impressed in that Australia Cup game against Bentley Greens, Blake Hampton says you need Gerd and Rodwell to play a high line, then a coach willing to play a high line. That's a pretty interesting thing. But it will be interesting to see how they transition from Alex Wilkinson, who's been an amazing centre back over the years in the A-League for Sydney FC, for the Mariners, I think for Melbourne City as well. It'll be interesting to see how much game time Gerd sees. Because, like you say, Sydney FC haven't played the kids. They've been resistant to do that over the years. So I hope we see a lot of Gerd because there was a lot of promise in that Australia Cup game. But, in saying that, Alex Wilkinson played a beautiful pass to set up Adrian Segicic. So, maybe Alex Wilkinson still got it and doesn't want to miss a game. And he's
Shout
been
out
so
to you,
reliable.
by the way, for remembering the 10 games that Alex Wilkinson played for Melbourne City when I completely forgot that happened.
I don't know. Usually research, not my strong point. But, tonight having to do the heavy lifting, I guess.
Wilkinson, in terms of the transition, I think they could cope with losing one of Wilkinson or Ninkovic, not both. So you can't just take Wilkinson completely out of the mix as well.
No.
Because that's just too much upheaval for one club to take for their two great players. I think that's why Wilkinson will stay in the mix. And you might have to manage him, you might have to rotate him. But that's why I don't think we're going to see, again, the young players being relied upon as starting 11 players that often for Sydney FC.
I tell you what, it was when I was doing the stadium tour, I was thinking, oh, this would have been a nice place for Juan Mata to play. Or, oh, this would have been a nice place for Andres Iniesta. Or, because I was there when Del Piero made his debut. That stadium packed. They love a superstar. I was there when Dwight York made his debut back in the day. And the superstar kind of appeal is real. And it does make a tangible difference when you're sitting in the stadium. So
that Del Piero team stunk, by the way. They were
totally
really bad.
But you know what? The fans loved watching him. The fans, they'll still have better memories of that team because Del Piero scored 4 against Wellington, because he scored that free kick against Newcastle. Then they probably will on some of the seasons where they were better. Maybe not a championship winning team, but anyway.
A shit team in service of one star player being a crowd pleaser. If only Manchester United fans were with that forgiving in their assessment.
Macarthur Wellington. Who are you tipping there?
I don't know because I can't tell how good Macarthur are. I guess Macarthur have the home advantage. Look, I can't split them.
Does
to be
that
honest.
matter when it's Macarthur?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, Wellington have played just as many games in that area of the world, kind of. So yeah, I'll go Wellington. All
right. I think I'm hoping Macarthur are better. I'm hoping I have a reason to get excited about Macarthur here. Alan Riley's made the point. We've gone over an hour, Stoll out. We've gone over an hour. We haven't even hit half our topics. Adelaide United, Brisbane Roar. What do you think? Adelaide United Cup specialist. Do you buy into that narrative?
Yes, I do, because then you look at Brisbane Roar, the Cup flunkies, if you look at their record. They've made the quarterfinals twice in the whole existence of the FFA/Australia Cup. It was the last 2 editions that they made it. Before that, they were out round of 32, round of 16. Every time they played an A-League team for the first time, they're gone. And their performance against Avondale didn't fill me with confidence, so I'm going to go with Adelaide.
Yeah, okay. It'll be interesting. Brisbane Roar. I'm going to go with Adelaide as well, mainly because Brisbane Roar reportedly owe 2 councils money in regards to the training ground, and that never fills me with confidence when it comes.
There's
to
a lot of off the field noise has to affect the players in some way as well.
Yeah, that's true. That's
surely how are the players feeling about this Corey Brown situation? I would feel really bad if I was a player in that situation. I saw this happening to a teammate of mine. So.
Absolutely. I think that would be a natural reaction. And even seeing a few of their players like certain tweets over the weekend that were maybe supportive of the PFA and maybe a little critical of their own club, maybe gives you an inkling into what is the feeling within the club. And players tend to, in my experience, stick together more than, even if they think maybe a player's in the wrong, if they feel like he's been, punished more than he should have been. They tend to kind of get together and really support each other.
By the way, I have no idea what this is related to. It could have just been an injury that they didn't want to tell me about, but I asked why Jay O'Shea was not in the squad against Avondale, and the response I got was confidential. Just a one word. That was it. So I don't know what it was. They wouldn't tell me whether it was illness, COVID, injury, whatever. But if Jay O'Shea doesn't play again, I can't see him winning.
Yeah, doesn't fill you with a lot of confidence. Hey, one thing I was just going to ask you before we move on from the A-League. You commentated an kind of a trial match with Melbourne Victory or a friendly kind of off season. They're out of the cup at the moment. Nani got some minutes. What did you kind of glean from that experience?
I mean, what a night to see Nani's debut, starting debut for Melbourne Victory in Dandenong. I don't think anyone had that, as a prediction. Fantastic.
When he was winning Champions Leagues, like in 2008 with Manchester United, in 14 years' time, my friend, you will be making your debut for a new club in Dandenong.
Incredible. Not the best playing surface at George Andrews that night. It was it's a little bit boggy, but you could see glimpses. Like Victory didn't play that well, but they got the win in the end. A quickly taken free kick by Rai Marchand, scoring his, I think, first ever goal that he's ever scored for Victory. Obviously it's a friendly game, so it doesn't really count. But I thought it was amazing in a friendly game for someone to take a free kick while the goalkeeper is still setting up the wall.
I love
It's an MPL team.
In a friendly.
Massive respect for Rai Marchand. The shithousery is off the charts. I love it. And his teammates were ribbing him about it as well. Very, very, very funny. Roderick Miranda keep teasing him. So, I respect the hustle. I respect the gamesmanship. But yeah, Nani, like there were just a few moments where he takes the ball down out of the sky and just like spins somebody, and you just go, "Ooh, that's class." So that's substantive.
Why you were paid the big money.
Yeah. Like there was a few times where, he kind of butchered counterattacking opportunities and when Victory had numbers forward, he tried to play too ambitious a pass or whatever, but the things you iron out,
Yeah, and I believe he's played more minutes than Sturridge already. So that's kind of a positive on that note. No, because I mean, that is the big thing. You want to know, like, have we signed someone who's going to last more than 2 or 3 games?
Sneaky plug, by the way. I might be doing another one of those this week. We'll see.
All right, cool. Check it out. Melbourne Victory socials are probably the best place to check it, or Josh Parrish's Twitter account. We should move on to the Matildas. We'll talk about the young Matildas first because they crashed out during the week of the Women's World Cup, the Women's Under-20 World Cup. They lost 3-0 to Spain. Did you have a chance to kind of watch this game? Or what was your kind of overall thoughts of the young Matildas campaign?
I feel like when you draw from such a narrow pool of players, I don't see how that can possibly be reflective of the best talent in the country. That's all. That's really all I can say on the issue. Every single player is from Blacktown, which is like Western Sydney Wanderers light. And I just don't see how that can possibly be the case that those are the best 11 players of that age group. It doesn't seem right to me. Maybe it's a statistical anomaly. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah. Just from the bits that I saw, especially against I watched the 2 games where they lost to Brazil and Spain. It didn't fill me with great confidence. Look, Brazil and Spain are 2 amazing football nations, and even though they're not as maybe traditionally strong in the women's game as they are in the men's game, they're still very strong teams, especially kind of in the last few years. In 15, I don't know how long that we've kind of had, to use the title of this podcast, but the national curriculum. I see a lot of...
You said the thing.
I said the thing. I see a lot of...
Leonardo DiCaprio pointing at screen meme. Insert here.
I see a lot of the centre-backs trying to play out. Maybe not necessarily the midfielders, getting in positions for those centre-backs to play out. They don't... traditionally, and I'm not talking about just the young Matildas, I'm talking about all Australian teams, youth teams over the years. You just watch them, often just kind of hoof it back in the day. We don't seem to do that as much, but we don't seem to play through lines. We don't seem to produce many wingers who, like we were talking about earlier, have the confidence to go past a player, to try something, to create that moment, to create that scoring opportunity. It does seem like, regardless of this team, but the same mistakes are being made generation after generation. And there are some slight improvements, and the technical abilities of one or two players, you'll be like, oh, wow, that's like impressive. But overall, we seem to still be producing the same type of teams that struggle to play against teams, any decent opposition, basically. Struggle to play out, struggle to play through lines, struggle to create chances. We're not too bad in transition. We're hard workers. We harry and press and set pieces and all that. But
Aussie DNA, never say die.
Right? But it's just every time I watch a youth tournament, under 17s, under 20s, men's, women's, whatever, there's always a hope. Oh, maybe the new generation will be different. And every single time, it does seem like it's okay. Again, we got another kind of, this is the new crop. Now, like you say, is not pulling from the full, the full country. So that makes it difficult. And there are a lot of other issues kind of going into this tournament in terms of, how long the team got to spend together and all the conditions. But again, also, I don't follow the other teams closely enough, but I'm sure they don't have ideal preparations, and they've got millions going into their under 20s women's, budget, and, the Brazilian coaches flying all around the country, seeing every single player. I'm not sure if that happens. So I just think while there are excuses made, I just think we're making the same mistakes. And one for Chief Football Officer Ernie Merrick to get on the case and try and sort it all out.
It's funny you mention the national curriculum, not the podcast, because the new coach of the Western Sydney Wanderers women's team, Kat Smith, if her Alamein teams that I've watched in MPLW Victoria anything to go by, is the most strict, like the strictest adherent to that formula that I maybe ever seen. I've described her coaching before to some other people on the scene as it's as if she not only read the document but maybe swallowed it and ingested it. Like, I don't know if you've seen the Black Books episode where Manny ingests the Little Book of Calm, and it's so clearly inspired by that particular coaching curriculum. And she's going to be the reason I bring that up is because she's going to be coaching a lot of the players that are in this under 20s Women's World Cup squad, because a lot of them are Western Sydney Wanderers players. So whether that benefits them or not, well, I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, absolutely. Run them memes makes the point. Every new generation will be the same as the last because the same people are still running the game. Well, fresh face Ernie Merrick and Ron Smith are on the case, and I'm sure the revolution is coming. Shotskis says, yes, we are making the same mistakes time and time again. As fans, we are frustrated. I mean, yeah, it is very frustrating to just see every time. You're like, all right, maybe we're different. No, we're not. We should talk about.
I love this, by the way. Just comment of the night so far.
Oh, read it out.
Yeah, maybe our national identity is struggling to play out against decent opposition, and we should embrace it. That's our style of play.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It is frustrating. I mean, it seems like we have the ambition to be a nation where we play kind of, attacking, attractive, possession-based football. And then everyone seems to shit themselves when that is required, basically. And even kind of, I made this point before, especially watching Spain, but just the level of coaching and what an under 12 girl is being coached at a local team in Spain is very different to what an under 12 girl is being coached at a local team in Australia. And I think that's an issue that gets exasperated over time.
It's funny you mentioned that, because I was interviewing Sasha Ognanovsky this week in my role at Preston, because he's the new football director there. And I asked him why he's taking on the role, what's the motivation, and he went on this long spiel about the state of Australian football and this, that, and the other. And he says, I see 15-year-olds all the time that can't trap a ball, and to me, that's sad. And all this stuff about how basic things are being overlooked and kids get left behind because these curriculums aren't implemented properly. And it's all based on whether you're lucky enough to have a good coach.
Yeah.
a talented coach, as opposed to the curriculums actually being implemented properly. So yeah, I thought that was super interesting, and yeah, it'd be interesting to see like how Preston, as an example of a local club, goes about trying to improve the resources available to their coaches and trying to make it a little bit easier for a lot of volunteer junior coaches, because they're not even an NPL program; they're in a community program at the moment in juniors. Trying to improve that standard and make it, and give them the resources available, and having like the 6-week blocks and so forth to actually make sure that kids are being taught what they need to be taught.
Shotsky says one planet-sized mistake we have in this country is thinking that tactical inflexibility is something to be proud of. It's not a bad point there. Run Them Meme says attacking possession-based football costs an extra $5,000 in fees. Yeah, I mean, look, that's another issue, the amount people have to pay. Torres makes the point, USA and Germany under 20s also went out, so maybe not just quite as bad as people think. It's not so much the going out at the group stage is a problem. For me, it's just that it's the same issues that we had. I think it was against Brazil, something like 58% possession for one shot that was off a free kick from distance that was straight at the keeper. Like, what are you doing with the ball? You have the ball, you're doing nothing with it. The other team, you might be controlling the possession, the other team is controlling the match and basically laughing at you as they're doing it. So I don't know. It's quite frustrating. Hirado says we just have a very naive view of how we want to play. It's not a bad point. Something that isn't frustrating, at least for Matildas fans based in Melbourne, is the fact that there's going to be a Matildas game in Melbourne coming up. I think it's in November. We're going to play Sweden. Josh, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, interesting, because Sweden are a proper team. And that's going to be hard. And I assume that we're going to have a full strength squad available again. And it's not going to be like the Spain and Portugal friendlies where we had that huge rotation of players, and it was Matildas B. Yeah, cool. But to have that game happening in Melbourne, I've had a lot of criticism of my geographical knowledge on this show today. And, the reason is like, why would I go anywhere else? But no, it's going to be very cool to have the team down here. And
first Matildas game in almost 4 years.
Yeah. Especially since Melbourne aspires to be the home of the Matildas in terms of that training base that they're converting it at La Trobe Uni, which is basically Melbourne City's old training ground, because they've moved down to Casey Fields. That's the new project in Victoria, to have that home of the Matildas. So to have no games there for 4 years doesn't really suggest that Melbourne is the home of the Matildas. Maybe that can change.
Look, it's exciting for Matildas fans based in Melbourne and all football fans based in Melbourne. But I'm just going to read something out from Joey, who sent us a message because he knew he might not be able to come on the show tonight, but he did want to make this point. Not a single football journalist received an invite to the Matildas match announcement at Amy Park. Why is Football Australia not even going to the effort of ensuring that the increasingly tiny number of journalists that cover football week in, week out in this country are able to come down to a major announcement less than a year out from a home Women's World Cup and ask a question of the Federation's CEO? Acknowledging that the Victorian government likely controlled the timing of the announcement and who broke it, but that shouldn't have stopped them from inviting journalists down themselves.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fair point. If you're going to have this, like the CEO down there, is it just for a photo op? It's not great.
It's part of like a wider conversation of like, there is a small, section of the media for Australian football. There's very few people left that cover Australian football full time. In fact, I'm struggling to think of anyone who now covers Australian football exclusively full time. There's very few of them left, and
neither of us do. That's for sure.
No, and not employed by the A Leagues or Federation, Football Australia or whoever. So you just want to make it kind of as easy as possible for the ones that do to continue to promote your game, to continue to grow your game. And I don't know, even if there is controversy in the game, which football journalists will bring up and will, rightfully ask questions about. I still think that helps grow interest in the game. There's controversy about, Madrid and Barcelona every 5 seconds, and they seem to have no problem, growing their fan bases worldwide. So I don't know. It is an interesting one, but I guess another test for Tony Gustafsson that, like, are we expecting things to be much better? And if they're not, will he just continue on and on until the Women's World Cup?
I think it would be very late to make a change now.
Yeah.
Look,
We've
not
got
sure.
2 games coming up against Canada in September.
Mm.
Then we've got these games, this game against Sweden. They're decent sides, Canada and Sweden.
Yeah.
I'm not expecting amazing results or anything, but I don't know. I'm hoping for an improvement at the very least. Like,
I mean, 2 really strong performers at the Olympics.
Yeah.
2 like Sweden. In all honesty, played us off the park at the Olympics. And I'm expecting a real test, and this will be a good barometer of where the team is actually at, and whether Tony G has had any luck in solving some of the systemic issues that are clearly at play in this squad that I think still has a really high ceiling. I still believe that, even if some of the coverage in the wider mainstream media about the Matildas is still a little condescending and how uncritical it is.
yeah.
I still believe this group, with the right, culture and tactics and all that sort of stuff, has a really high ceiling. So.
We should say as well, the Victorian government said they'll go do $25 million worth of upgrades for the stadium's lighting, video screens, and broadcast facilities, as well as player, corporate, and spectator amenities. This is ahead of next year's World Cup. Was it required? You'd know AAMI Park better than me. Every time I've been there, I've been really impressed by
the roof has leaked a couple of times.
Okay.
So that might be something to do with that. No, it's I think upkeep is always really important to ensure that your brand shiny asset doesn't become out of date or fall into disrepair.
Yeah.
It's still an awesome place to watch football. Let's not beat around the bush. I also I would say that the media facilities there are a little cramped. It helps that there's almost no one covering football full time in Australia. But if there were, you'd be a little short of space in the press box and so forth.
Should we move on to Aussies abroad? And I kind of, some Aussies been doing some great stuff. I saw Martin Boyle scored for Hibernian against Rangers. Awa Mobile made his starting debut for Cardiff in there, I think 2-0 loss. Didn't do too much, but, it's still good to see him there. But there's a couple of players that I'm pretty concerned about at the moment. It's kind of Tom Rogic, one of them. There was a report today that he might be going to Everton. Which kind of seemed out of left field. Everton, Frank Lampard interested in signing Tom Rogic. So, what did you think about that one?
Interesting. Frank Lampard has been very vocal in preseason that he hasn't had the signings that he wanted. And we know Everton have spent a lot of money and they've wasted a lot of money.
Yeah.
And they seem to be looking to cash in on a couple of their brightest players. I was doing highlights for Everton's game last night, and Anthony Gordon was by far and away their brightest attacking talent, and they look like they're about to flog him to Chelsea for £45 million. So they need bodies. is the truth of it. Rogic in the Premier League at this stage of his career, with his injury record, and we still have no answer as to what it is that was the off-field issue that kept him out of the Socceroos squad and he was dipped off the radar. We still don't know what that was about, so no idea where his head's at. I have my doubts about how successful that would be, but certainly a good opportunity and one to definitely consider. But I do think Everton are in trouble this season. I don't think they're out of the woods when it comes to relegation danger. and I still have serious reservations about Frank Lampard as a manager. But if you get an opportunity to play in the Premier League,
Take it.
I think you have to take it.
Especially given like he was linked with, teams in Indonesia and a team in Cyprus, and for him to end up at Everton would be incredible.
Strikes me as the manager trying to deal with having no budget at the end of the transfer window, dealing with an owner who's cut off the flow of funds. Well, and also, like, you can sign free agents a little bit after the transfer window ends up finishing as well. There's like a couple of weeks extra leeway on that front.
Another one I kind of wanted to bring up is, a player that I feel like people have forgotten how good he was, but Massimo Luongo. This guy was our best player at the Asian Cup in 2015 when we won it, when he was, I think, 21 years old and nominated in the long list for the Ballon d'Or that year. He didn't get much game time kind of in the Socceroos after Ange left. And that's for a number of reasons.
He even dipped out of favour while Ange was still there.
Yeah.
Honestly, like, if you look, and this has been well covered by likes of Geraldo and even in that kind of long read Evan Morgan Graham piece before he became our meme lord when he used to write tactics articles, it very clearly articulates a dip in Socceroos' performance when we move from Luongo to Moy as our main creative fulcrum in midfield.
Yeah.
And there were different reasons why Luongo dipped out of favour, club form, injuries, this, that, and the other. But Luongo playing as the most advanced in a midfield three, in a 4-3-3, was Australia's winning formula at the Asian Cup. And he was amazing. He was so good in that tournament. It's just a tragedy that is what's happened to his career.
It's funny, like him and Rogic, that look, they're not the most expressive of people, but there does seem like this series, like the number of Australian footballers who almost seem to fall out of love with the game. And I don't know if it's because their careers don't pan out exactly how they thought they would, or they're a long way from home, and it's a weird thing. But even if you think about how like Sporanovic just retired for 2 years and just kind of disappeared and then came back, and it's not uncommon for Australian footballers to at least appear like they're not enamored by the game, and it's hard to tell. Again, they don't do many interviews, so it's hard to kind of put this in. But sometimes I just wonder, like, how much do they actually enjoy this lifestyle of being a professional footballer at the level that they're at?
I think the distance is a major part of it, like being away from family, all that stuff. I think part of the reason that Ange Postecoglou was quite successful as Socceroos manager, and the reason why when the team was not functioning very well, they still managed to make the World Cup, is because the team kind of bonded together on a basis of, like, this is really hard to do what we do, to have the lifestyle and the sacrifice of these long trips and the toll it takes on your body, and the toll it takes on your club career when you go play for your country, and your national team career when you go play for your club, and you're serving these two masters. And it's always been difficult for Australian players in that regard, because, European managers don't understand why you're flying halfway across the world to play against, Chinese Taipei or whatever it is. So, I think that's part of the issue, is like it's more demanding when you are a Socceroo in Europe.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be interesting how those two pan out. I really hope they find a club soon, because I'd really like to see them both involved in the Socceroos squad come World Cup time. The other one that I'm a little bit concerned about is Hrustic. I think he's our best player, and for him to still kind of be out of the frame at Frankfurt.
There was so much transfer talk around him.
There was
still hasn't happened.
Yeah, there was a lot of talk that he was going to Serie A, Salernitana, who relegation threatened team. It seems like he was
falling back in love with football, by the way, playing at Salernitana.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing was interesting was that the offer seemed to be there, but he was kind of waiting on his options, which suggested that he had better options. There was talk of Betis, but I don't know where that came from. I didn't see that anywhere in Spain. I only saw that here in Australia, which made me a little suspect about that. Or at least I didn't see anything about that recently in Spain. It was kind of, I know there was talk like 6 months ago or maybe kind of longer, but yeah, I think
I don't think he plays for Betis if he goes there, to be honest.
It's a
It's a
really good team.
It's stacked.
Yeah, it's a really, really good. If he can get in that team, like that's incredible for him. But it is a massive thing. Look, I think we should come towards the end of the show. I think we've done pretty well to get it to an hour and 40 minutes at this stage. But we should end with your questions coming in. We did have a few coming in on Twitter, so I'll just read them out as they've come in. Prospective Proxima Centauri B Ambassador. Don't know why that's his Twitter name. Whatever that's in reference to, is it worth it? Everyone being so confused. But he's at Elf Vandel 20. Delbridge and Grant, the Alex version, as potential bolters for the Socceroos. Do you see it?
Maybe Alex Grant. He's been playing regularly for, is it Pohang?
In South Korea, I know he's playing there.
Yeah. It's Pohang Steelers, which is a big team. So yeah, I can see it. Sure, why not? It's all based on, like, you know, if Kai Rolls playing for the Mariners can get in the national team, then is it beyond Alex Grant as a left-sided centre back?
Yeah,
I don't think so.
Yeah, it's true. All right, let's have a look at some of the other questions. Mike W. Francis, he says Angus Thurgate would have to be close to the top of the list of Aussies who should be jetting off. With his first name, Scotland seems a good destination. I do like the idea of assigning players to leagues just based on their first name. Angus Thurgate, personally, I'd like to see him stay in the A-League. I really liked watching him play for the Jets if he does make that step up, but Scotland for a kind of creative midfielder,
He's got an engine though, Thurgate.
Yeah,
he does. He's a runner.
That's true.
You know,
that's true.
He's a sort of third man runner into the box as well. He stretches defenses with that kind of movement. He's not. Yeah. It's not as if he's a player who always wants the ball to feet. So I don't hate it. The reason everyone's going to Scotland is because it's just easier to get a visa there.
Exactly.
Than it is in England. So they're going there instead of League One and the Championship.
There's a question here from Jules334. Are there any players Western United could be signing or are looking at? I'm going to say there are players they could be signing. There are players they are looking at. I have no information. I just assume that a professional club that hasn't quite filled out their roster would be doing that. Josh, do you have any more specific news on that front?
I got nothing in terms of, exclusives or rumors, but you look at the way that they nailed their foreign signings last season. You got to replace some of those guys like Krahin and potentially Prijovic is still up in the air. I think they'll come up with some good players, and you've always got Diamante there as like the recruitment help. He seems to be able to. He's got a Rolodex of contacts, it seems, and he managed to convince Leo Lacroix to come and join. He was part of the charm offensive on that front. So yeah, I think they'll reel in some good European talent again.
On the subject of Western United, AK Chapman asks, question, Prijovic, is he coming back to Western United?
It's increasingly unlikely, but he's still under contract, so they've got to agree a fee for him. He can't just leave. So
it doesn't seem like he wants to come back. Look, I was just in Europe. I was having a great time. I didn't want to come back. I totally get it. I was on another podcast recently where I made the claim that all Australians should mass migrate to Southern Europe for basically the months of about May to about September. If Prijovic is starting that, I'm on board. Geraldo makes the point. Luongo loved the game enough, at least until his injury hell at Wednesday in the last 2 years. Specifically various Socceroos managers just didn't love him back. Yes, quite dramatic from Geraldo there.
We didn't know what we had till it was gone. With Luongo. But it was interesting that he did post on his Instagram story recently. Like he shared. I think he shared the post where basically Sheffield Wednesday was saying, thanks and success, and he said
Yeah.
something like "news to me" or like "really."
Ooh.
So, yeah,
Ooh.
ouch.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see Luongo move away from England. Maybe I think Jackson Irvine was another player who he had his issues with Hull and similar
Yeah.
like contractual issues, and then he spent some time with Hibs, but then he's gone to Germany with St. Pauli, where he's kind of playing in the second division. Captain seems to be loving it. Seems to be getting regular football.
The melding of a personality and a particular club culture couldn't be better. And he's an ideal player for Zwei Bundesliga, like because it's so like up and at 'em, go go go. They need those players with big engines, physical pressing. So
maybe talking about kind of putting a player in a region just because of his name, but Massimo Longo does have an Italian background. So maybe Serie B could be kind of an interesting thing.
A resident cinch Premiership fan has come fired back at you, mate.
Lockie Flanagan says, Stoll, Scotland with a creative midfielder. Rogic, am I a joke to you? Look, first of all, I'll say if Angus Thurgate is being approached by Celtic, then yes, take it. That's a great move for you, especially under Ange Postecoglou. Look, Lockie would know better than me how creative midfields kind of do in kind of the lower teams of Scotland, which I assume Angus Thurgate, that's kind of more where he'd be heading. But I'd also say
HEA RTS boy.
I'd also say
I'll tell you what it says. Sorry.
Is that the song or something that they
sing?
sing?
Yeah.
Okay. Shout out Hearts. Shout out the city of Edinburgh. Edinburgh, by the way, having the Fringe Festival on at the moment, which looks awesome, and people on my Instagram are having a great time over there. Also, Edinburgh having a bin man strike, and the bin men are refusing to take the bins for 11 days. 11 days of rubbish piling up. So, good luck to the people of Edinburgh.
That's tough.
Yeah, I can't remember actually what point I was going to make regarding. Just Rogic. He stood out. He stood out because he was one of the few creative midfielders there. And he was very successful.
And he also played for the team that had about 80% of the ball in most of the games.
Yeah, every single game, yeah. Elijah asks via Twitter, question right now, who would be the 26 people you would take to Qatar for the Socceroos? I feel like that's another pod. I feel like before the team gets announced, we can kind of go through. But, it'd be a tough case to take Luongo and these players that we're talking about who aren't playing. So it'll be interesting to see. Obviously, the transfer window shuts in, I think, 10 days or 11 days from now. So it'll be interesting to see that. But look, we've come to 1 hour 46. Josh, have you had a good time tonight?
I've had a sensational evening, actually. Yeah. A lot of airtime for us too. Sometimes we get drowned out, but tonight able to come to the fore and shine in the spotlight. So good fun.
Look, I hope the viewers, the listeners, had a great time. Please, if you don't already, subscribe to us on all podcasts and blah. Subscribe to us on multiple. Even if you just use one podcast app, download another podcast app and subscribe to us there because it will boost our numbers. Give us 5 stars as a rating. If you don't like us, still give us 5 stars. And then leave a comment explaining why you don't like it, because I know people don't read the reviews, and if they just see, this has got 1 million 5-star ratings, it can't be wrong. If you're watching us on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe.
If you don't like us and you're still watching at the 1 hour 47:30 mark, I think you actually might like the show. So
hate watch, watch,
and that's that's a service we can provide too. So
I don't care. I'll take your eyeballs as long as I have your attention. It doesn't bother me. Josh, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Fans and people who engaged in the comments, thank you so much for being the third co-host of the evening. Thank you to Joey who tuned in for about 5 seconds at the airport. Run Them Memes says it's a hate watch at this point. Man, you made the opening credits and the closing credits. All right.
Hey, hate watching is a powerful thing,
Yeah. You're hate creating at this point. You're part of the production. Gerardo says I had an adequate time.
I'm glad.
Look, Gerardo, I mean, give us a little bit. There's 2 of us tonight.
Hey, he's a Brisbane Roar fan. I think an adequate time is about as good as you can hope for at the moment.
Yeah, contrasting to the Brisbane Roar experience. There's a thanks, fellas, there.
Geraldo would recommend this podcast to 34% of his friends.
This podcast has no outstanding
34% of TNC listeners recommend it to prospective podcast fans.
Hey, we'll be back. Someone's asked Lazar11, when's Hirado on the pod? Whenever he wants. But
open invite. Honestly.
But also his comments. We need quality in the comments. So we need kind of, it's like an important position. So he always kind of provides really quality comments. So that's an important position to play. Lockie Flanagan, on the other hand, good on the show, sometimes good in the comment section. When I'm with him in the comment section, I feel we have a good tandem. Gets lost when he starts criticizing me there. So, but congratulations to Lockie for making his Paramount Plus debut.
I need Geraldo to come on so I can confirm or deny my secret suspicion that he's actually an Ante Jukic burner. So, that's my conspiracy theory. But
I do like that conspiracy theory. Josh, thanks so much for coming on. Everyone tune in next week, 7:30. We don't know who will be on. Probably Vince Regari. He promises every week. He then pulls out, whether it's because he's busy or because the lawyers have recommended that he does. But open invite as well, friend of the show. And yeah, we'll be back next week. I'm not sure what we'll be discussing. I guess Australia Cup, more signings. We'll see where the Socceroos players have ended up. But yeah, have a great time. Enjoy your week. Enjoy your football. And we'll see you next week.
We all know the real reason.